So I'm really excited about the next portion of our program. It's called the Perfect Pitch Panel. What we did is we asked those of you who had already purchased a ticket early last month to submit a query letter so we could consider discussing them this morning. And I shared all of them with our esteemed panelists here, and we narrowed the choices down to 3. So what we're going to do is ask those 3 writers to come on up here and take a seat at the stool to my left. And they're going to read their query letter. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, what's working in those letters, what's maybe not working quite so well, and, sort of discuss how authors can best present themselves and their work to, publishing professionals, either on the page or in person. Okay, our first contestant.
Dear Mr. Larimer, thank you so much for inviting me to submit my query letter to the Perfect Pitch panel.
Dear Mr. Wiley, my life is about going for the long odds.
So I'll just start reading, but this is slightly different from what I sent you. I couldn't help revising, I'm afraid. I am seeking representation for Between Countries, a tightly plotted 248,000-word novel of expats and Indians living in 1960s Bombay.
I slightly laughed at tightly plotted 248,000 words. There's so much in here. There's a lot here that's really interesting and meaty and fascinating. Interesting issues, complicated story. In the span of about 12 lines, you've introduced us to 6 characters plus Indira Gandhi, and I couldn't keep up with it.
I often want that in a query letter. Like I'll get a paragraph like this is very common because an author is struggling to describe all the intersections and the people and their intersections, and I would advise against trying to tell us all of those intersections, and instead, it might have been an opportunity to take a line from your book or several lines from your book, and let them give us a sense of, a tactile sense, a voice sense, which gives us a ton more information than a paragraph like this.
A big recommendation I would give to all of you is, I'm sure you're sometimes sharing your query letter with, with friends or your fellow writers or whoever, but read your query letter aloud and ask them if they can follow the story, if it makes sense to them. I wasn't exactly sure what kind of novel I'm reading here. Like, is this a thriller? Like, tightly plotted says to be thriller, Like, is this a thriller? Is it supposed to be realistic? Is it a farce? Is it but something more about the tone that this novel exists in is absent for me from this letter. What I want to know in any introductory letter is, what kind of experience am I going to have when I'm reading this book?
I felt like, can you give us the center of the storm? That's kind of what I desperately wanted in that paragraph.
This is a man who's edited a couple of 1,000-page novels.
Yeah, loosely plotted ones, even. I wonder if you could try it almost. I wonder if you could try it almost without the names entirely, and really sort of try to just pick up on that strong point.
That's a good idea.
Just conveying the action of it. I don't really need to know which person is named Oscar and which person is named Carl.
I also felt that your point about having lived in Bombay for a few years was one of the strongest points of the letter, since it takes place there. Places like travel blogs, all that. It's a really good selling point to show how well you know this country that you wrote about.
I think some people sit down to write a query letter and they feel like they have to use publishing speak, women's fiction. Or they have to use sort of a thank you note speak. I hope you feel an affinity. And I think if you don't talk that way, don't put it in your query letter. I'd rather hear you be really yourself, and then compress beautifully what your book is about.
Your need to kind of slot it into a sales category is not necessary, for me at least. That's kind of the agent's job or the publisher's job. Things that are about the form of a work of upmarket women's fiction told with alternating points of view. I didn't think, in the very kind of first sentences of your query letter, that's kind of not a selling point per se. I mean, you don't sort of, nobody kind of goes to a book and says, I really want something with alternating points of view. So you want to put the most kind of charismatic aspect of your book forward.
The one thing all these query letters had in common is, as I recall, none of them had a quote or a line pulled from the book. And I always like, if you can't convey the voice of the book in your query letter, then if you feel like you're struggling, then pull something from your book that's very evocative and sort of poses questions and answers questions at the same time for those of us who are reading.
To get back to Kevin's point, needing to explain that many of the ins and outs of the plot is less important than giving a sense of the voice of the book. Okay. So to the extent that you can get the voice of the book into your letter, that's usually important. Because once you get people in, all you're trying to do is get them to get to the first page, and then hopefully your book takes over.
You did something that some of the other examples didn't do, which is you tried to get familiar quickly, and you tried to have a conversation with the agent, which is a really good thing to do. Like you're trying to not just sell.
You want to know that somebody's not just spraying, even though they are. So many query letters. You want to know why they're writing to you, and that can be good. It means you feel like the writer's done their research, which is hugely important. I did also want to hear a little bit more about your background, where you've published, and like that. That can be relevant because it can tell us a bit about the kind of writing that you're doing.
I love knowing personal details about an author. I think it's really helpful for us in terms of what we do.
In that general space of talking about those other books, the word admire is the one you need to get rid of and replace with a whole other set of words to describe the relationship between your book and those books. The dead man is younger than the live man.
Yes.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And they're headed back to the young man's funeral.
So that would be
He's
great.
got to make his funeral in the now.
So I think that it would be very helpful to really articulate
Yeah.
I didn't know. Okay.
But really, you're just trying to say, I was qualified. I had the authority to write this book, and you're the person who should be reading it. You're the person who should be representing it or publishing it.
Yeah, don't apologize for your work. In your query letter, your work is your work, and you've done. Hopefully, you've gotten it as far as you can get, so that it's ready for an agent or an editor to look at it. Obviously, I joked about the 248,000 words. I mean, I raised my eyebrows. I was like, it's a long book, but I kept reading. I'm going to keep reading it. So you're just going to have to make a good case for your work, and fundamentally, like if they get past the query letter, the writing on the page is going to keep people moving through a long book or not.
I think the biggest flaw in most queries is that they sound wooden. They sound like you're scared to tell the truth about your book, or you're scared to reveal something about yourself. And we read queries the same way we read everything. We want to have this human connection. We want to feel what you want to convey. We want to be there. We want to discover you. We want you to blow us away in the query.